it gives us really great pleasure to be presenting today, because this is the first time we are able to present on our OLT project where we've just submitted our report. So this is the first of our dissemination of that report. And have you moved this slide?
Oh, I'm sorry.
This was a great OLT project. We had a really rich and diverse group of people. We had Carol Joy from Griffith University. She was the lead, and she's done a number of other OLT projects before. We've got people from CQU, Deakin, RMIT, and of course us. And it's also been interesting because we've had academic staff, professional staff, and we've covered a number of disciplines.
Can I interrupt?
Of course.
The other thing to note about the team, I think, is that very few members of the team were the same when we finished. There was lots of changes and turnovers along the way, which added to the interest, but also the richness and the data and the experience as well.
It was great. I think we got to know each other. If any of you are going in for an OLT project, so I'm sorry, this is a bit of an aside, I would strongly suggest that you have a couple of days at critical times when everyone meets. So we would go for 2 days at a time to Brisbane, and we got the best findings, the best results, the best reports were written after a few glasses of bread. but really, the project progressed because we had that interaction. Okay, the outline. Today we're just going to tell you a little bit about the project. What is distributed leadership, because it's based on distributed leadership, how we developed the framework, responsibilities, challenges, key findings, and the domains. Now, before we talk about that, I think I should tell you what we mean by work integrated learning, because there's so many definitions. We've taken here the definition from the WILL project, which was done by Carol Joy Patrick and colleagues, which is the umbrella term used for a range of approaches and strategies that integrate theory with the practice of work within a purposefully designed curriculum. So basically it covers everything. It covers simulation, practicums, field placements, internships. It's the umbrella term. And one of the reasons we were doing it is because there's been so much emphasis on practice-based learning, WILL, whatever you call it, that it's really important to understand the competencies, capabilities, capacities of the people who are leading it. So this is a project about the leadership of WILL.
Yes, I was just going to say the highlighted second last bullet point there was really the focus of our work. Sure, we spent some time investigating what's going on in different institutions. We looked at challenges and enablers and focusing on capabilities and capacities. But the focus of our work really, and the primary output of our work, has been the production of the framework. And we should mention that we've brought along today one of the early flyers from the work, which has details about the framework and something you should pick up if you're interested later on. One of the early initial conversations or disagreements we had was this notion of distributed leadership and what does it really mean. The literature was telling us that leadership really is different from management. Management is very much a hierarchical thing and has to do with a position in an organisation, where leaders can be dispersed throughout the organisation. They don't really have to occupy a position or even be a manager in the organisation. And there was a lot of literature, and Sam Jones did an OLT project on distributed leadership that was very useful and helpful to us. But the focus of our work was really to see leaders throughout the organisation, not just at the pointy bit of the pyramid. And the people that we spoke to, the people we engaged with, were they. So we got data from colleagues within universities across the Eastern Seaboard, and with colleagues we interviewed people, we ran focus groups. We also sought data from industry partners and organisations with them. A bit difficult to get them to come on campus, so we ran surveys. We did a survey twice with lots of follow-ups and that sort of thing. Interestingly, the response from partner organisations, employers, probably wasn't as strong as what we experienced within our institutions. The other thing to note is that the various institutions focused on different faculty areas. So in our university, we were interested in, we worked with people from the business school and tourism, whereas all the faculties were involved in different universities. We also gather data from ourselves because, as Freny said, we come from different perspectives and have different interests in working creative learning. Freny, for example, is in careers, and I'm an academic, cold-faced. So everyone in between was all part of that. We had deans and deputy deans and program heads and associate lecturers. Everyone was involved and invited and came along. I would say that there was a lot of interest, a lot of enthusiasm to talk about the work that our colleagues were doing in the area of field. Of course, we did literature searches early on. That was comprehensive. We looked at will, we looked at leadership, distributed approaches, lots of models out there, tried to make sense of all those models in different contexts. And when we went to the stage of playing around with the data, trying to make sense of it, some things seemed to fall into place. And it seemed to us relatively early on, although it was a bit of a hard-won battle, but there was some stuff that was emerging out of that vaster range of data. So we put together a draft of what we thought the framework might be, and we took it back to our institutions, perhaps not to the same people, but we tried it out and asked people what they thought. Did it ring true? Did it make sense for them? How could they use a framework like this? And that was another data source, and we used that evaluation round as a way of contributing to the later parts of the stuff that we talked about today. We say they're key themes. They're not themes, they're sort of events that came out of the data. There were 10 areas of responsibility. They were very clear. It was amazing. Different faculties, different institutions, but the themes are very clear. And Freny is hurrying me along. It's interesting that key areas of responsibility were also challenges. And I don't think, for those of you who work in the area, there's not much here that's going to be enlightening, particularly enlightening. Policy was a big thing. Resources was a big thing. Institutional culture, institutional structures, the acknowledgement that people have, pedagogy and curriculum, all these things, external engagement, research and scholarship, and relationships with partner organisations. In some ways, you perhaps don't have to talk to lots and lots of people to see this as some of the key areas or key responsibilities for them. But it was great that this stuff came out of the data very clearly for us. The other thing about it is that this led to a lot of what the challenges and problems were around working in the area of work. And it was fascinating to see that it was like two ends of the coin. We would see matters around policy, she's hurrying me again, matters around policy were a challenge, but it was also an enabler. So policy, for example, could become an enabler for will, when for some people, their experience of it in their context was that it was a
policy was always the top one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes.
So they ranked 1 to 10?
No, we wouldn't do that. But in general sense, yeah, policy was probably more open, in what we discovered, especially towards that second column, be a little more difficult. The other thing to mention is that one of the big discussions we had throughout our work together was to keep in mind that we were actually thinking about distributed approaches to leadership. We weren't talking about hierarchical structures where there was a manager at the pointy end of the pyramid, but leaders were everywhere and dispersed throughout the organisation and doing different things at different levels. So we wanted to avoid the old conventional language around, strategy and the boss and the followers and those sorts of things. So we started to play with the notion that some people in an organisation were in enabling roles and some people were in enacting roles.
But it could be the same people sometimes.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Because sometimes you're an enabler and sometimes you're an enactor.
And interesting thing about that is that it was very clear that in large case it depends on the sort of role that people were performing, where they fit in that hierarchical structure. This is a slide about the enablers, the strategic enablers, who we would think of as people of importance in an organisation, people with management roles in some cases. Their focus was about opportunities, around awareness, influencing others. They wanted to be sure that there was a value or worth given to work integrated learning in the organisation. That became the sorts of things they were focusing. Securing resources, making sure the resources were there for others, and looking at vision, aspiration, and working towards collaboration, working out collaboration. Then the operational enablers, these were people with an implementation focus, had a slightly different concentration or theme on the work that they were doing. So they were looking at using collaborations and networks, implementing the structures and policies, involving people, practitioners from across the institution, external of the institution as well, but using networks. They were harnessing expertise, again, using those networks. And networking is about relationships, of course, and those relationships are important in our initial understanding of distributed leadership, and looking at achievements and accountability as well.
So this brings us to the key findings, and it was interesting to see that what we got, the findings, they were similar across diverse roles and settings. So it was interesting to see that we got similar challenges faced by leaders across all the five or six universities where we were doing the surveys. And the capabilities also required by leaders, they were similar. So that was really interesting. And it's the capabilities, it's the data we got from the capabilities that helped us to build a framework where we have the domains, and we do have a chart which you can see later on that. It also showed us the importance of strong leadership and the power of an integrated whole of organizational approach. That came through all the time. And also a grassroots commitment from people who are involved with WIL. So I'm not going to read through it because you can see what's on the screen. But those were some of the things that came out, but it's the capabilities that we used to develop the framework.
Yeah, and those findings were very, as you said, very common across institutions and common across different faculties, different disciplines as well, which I feel was found interesting. The last point there is not numbered, was also pretty strong, that industry partners are looking for more collaboration, and they saw it as something that they were looking to universities for. And Freny and I were just talking on the way in this morning that this kind of connects in a way with the recent statement of intent, the alliance between Universities Australia and big industry bodies that was announced a month or so ago, where there's a stronger connection, at least at that level, but certainly employer organisations and partners were wanting that as well. And
that brought us to the framework which we developed, where, and we have to emphasize, this is the WIL context, and this is through the prism of distributed leadership. So the WIL context could be different for different universities, and I say WIL, but it could be practice-based learning. And then we saw the 5 major domains which leaders have to have. And at the heart of it has to be shaping the WIL vision. So the vision is really the core part of it, because that's what influences all the other domains. Then you have the creating and sustaining WIL relationships, because as we all know, anything in WIL is collaborative, so you have to be dealing with people. Communicating and influencing, because people have to have a shared understanding of what you're doing. Driving organizational and joint industry-university outcomes, because then you can share the benefits. And fostering WIL engagement and expertise, that's really important, because that brings out the actual scholarship of learning and the scholarship of WIL. So we saw these as the 5 major domains. And that's how we built the framework. And we do have more information on this, which you can pick up. And we do have the report, but report we went on.
That thought just occurred to me. It doesn't show here, but this outer ring is yellow in the reproduction there. And it was clear to us that these 5 domains can have application in different institutions, in different faculties, in different ways. But what shapes the differentness of it is that outer ring, that real context. But the principle of that is the notion that leadership is distributed across different settings and different roles in different ways according to the context. Thank you.
We won't go through this, but we have all the details of each domain.
Can I say, what we've tried to do there is, towards the top there, look at the scope of each domain. So that provides some sort of focus on what we're sort of looking at here. What we've tried to do with that scope is deconstruct a little bit from the title that we've given to it. The other thing, I don't know whether I can say this or not. The other thing about the structure of how we've structured the domain like this is that we've broken it up into enablers and enactors, as I was saying before, and we've tried to understand the differences at this level within institutions and for partner organisations and boards as well. It's rather a complex notion in a format like this, but the data gets supported. Okay. This slide here is something that came out of our evaluation sessions after we had a draft of the framework, and we took it to colleagues and again to industry and asked for their feedback. Does it ring true? What sense do they make of it? What use could they make of the framework? And this is an attempt at trying to understand what people told us. And what we've got to do in the next slide is Francesca asked us if we would make a connection between the uses of the framework and the themes of this conference. So that's what we're aiming to do here.
And it's also good for a framework to have a use. There's no point in having a framework and just putting it out.
Yeah.
So it's a framework which does have a use, it does have application.
We think.
And
The uses in the left margin, the left column there, are colour-coded. And what we discovered was something that was quite unexpected, is that the uses that people told us about the framework seem to fit with some aspects of the domain, the various domains. And the colours here match the various domains that we talked about earlier. So working towards a will vision, playing with that, and what we've tried to do there is make the connection with the themes of the conference, ensure the policy can accommodate blended modes and specifically inclusive of equity groups. A leadership map enables strategic connections within institutions and with a focus on workplace learning. A support tool, looking at digital technologies, and looking beyond what might be considered usual practice in learning and teaching. A promotional tool around students. We were talking in the break with someone about the pushback that I often experience from my students when they're asked towards the end of their degree to engage in a actual program. So a promotional tool would be really interesting, and a position description tool around the capabilities of the staff as well. So I think that's about where we want to leave it.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wayne.